Hello, Dr. Mary. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well, Matt. Thank you for
Awesome.
having me.
No, thank you so much for coming. And Tom and I make this mistake almost with every guest. We'll just start talking casually before we hit go. And some of the best interview stuff happens, and we're like, oh crap, we didn't hit record. We got to
Yeah.
start officially.
You will
So
miss,
so
we'll
we
miss
try to
something that was like really insightful or something.
yeah. Yeah, we just have to be, we respect the process here, which is just hit go and let it go where it goes, kind of thing, right? So thanks for coming again. Yeah, let's just dive right in, man. I'm very curious about pretty much, I would say, most of everything I've read about you here. We've touched on all of them in various ways. We've had other guests that have talked about various versions of what you do, but none of them in your particular cocktail of ingredients, and actually none of them from an energetic standpoint. So
Yeah.
overall, I'm just super excited to get into this because energy is one of the things that we've sort of danced around here, but never really peeled it back and dove in on it. And I know you've got some interesting stuff you want to talk about with chakras and stuff. So let's just get into it. Start us off. How'd you get?
How'd you get to the chakra system with your background? Give us a little bit of the story of you.
Sure. Okay, so we'll keep it short. Let's see. The first thing that I need to share with everyone listening is that I am hearing impaired. I was born with a 50% deficit. And so right off the gate, I had to learn how to assimilate information using the extrasensory perceptions. Okay, above and beyond the 5 traditional senses. So from there, I literally was mainstream in education. I got my undergraduate degree in chemistry and zoology. 3 days after I finished my undergraduate degree, I was in chiropractic school. And then I graduated from chiropractic school by the age of 25. But what I realized when I hit into chiropractic school, that I was surrounded by beautiful people who were like-minded, who talked about the innate ability of the body to be able to heal itself. And yes, you can receive information from the sensitivities of your psychometry, energy coming into the hands, and you receive information above and beyond what the patient just tells you. So I really, really I was so thankful to finally be around people who were receiving information above and beyond the 5 senses. And I was being trained to learn how to develop them. And so I graduated. And then to make a long story short, I started to realize that my practice, which was a high volume practice at the time, was ran by energy. And Tom, you know how it is in the medical industry. You can have
Yeah.
a personality driven practice, right?
Yeah.
But that's not what was happening. What was happening is that the energy, the frequency that I held, there was an entrainment process that happened collectively of all the people that walked into the door, including the staff. So then I started to hear, oh, wow, you mean the healing starts like right when you enter in the door? And I'm like, heck yeah, it does. It certainly does. And so then, fast forward, I developed beautiful practices, and as an end result, I had an extreme burnout. My husband talked me to moving into the other side of the world. And so literally within 30 days, I woke up and I was in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam.
Nice.
And I
Wow.
went through, I know, right? Who goes through this?
So burnout, I'm assuming burnout came out of just that high volume environment that you were describing.
Yeah.
Chiropractic does seem very, get people in, get people out,
And I bought into that business model, and I had
Yeah.
a successful practice. And unfortunately, and Tom, I didn't get into the industry because I
Yeah.
thought that I was going to be a high volume practice. I was like, I knew at the age of 3 that I had to have my hands on physical body, that I knew. I knew with the trillions of my cells that was part of my purpose coming back this lifetime around. And so it was really disenchanting to me, Tom and Matt. I mean, literally, I was like, how did I get off my purpose when I got so focused on the business aspects of running a business? I was working for an overhead. I wasn't working to heal people.
Sure. By the
Yeah,
No,
way,
I
gold
feel like
star for
that's
being the
something
first.
that we all deal with, right? You know, it really you get into it for the right intentions, and whether it's Western medicine, traditional practices, or something alternative, you got to keep your doors open, right? And that requires a certain volume of people coming through. That requires you making a certain amount, and you sometimes get very distracted from that. Like, what's the purpose of this?
And by
right.
the way, gold star for being the first guest that we've had that has mentioned purpose in this time around. I actually, we worked with a coach a couple years back who was like, let's ask a question. At the moment just before your father ejaculated into your mother and you chose to take human form, what was your purpose? I was like, well, that's a question now, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. And it sent me down this entire different way of thinking about the world. But you are literally the first person that's ever brought up anything close to that. And I just, it's awesome.
Yeah, man, I do believe in that we
Yeah,
come back with whether they be karmic lessons or whether they be purposes in the orchestration of a divine blueprint and an alignment with one's purpose. I think that as we transcend through our lifetime, we go on and off that trajectory or pathway. And so
sure. Yeah, this
consequently,
opened up
I
soul families. We've got all kinds of like
absolutely,
Mhm.
rabbit holes we
absolutely.
went down on this. It was awesome. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to digress, but yeah, thank you for
That's okay. Yeah.
making me, because I have to be reminded of this too. I mean, like you said, you know, you're in the middle of a high volume world and you're keeping the doors open, lights on, all that stuff. Like it is shockingly easy to lose track of that line of
Yeah.
sight, right? Like it's just so easy, it's ridiculous. Like you know,
And to Tom's point, okay, there is a underlining overhead that one needs to meet. Obviously, when
Mhm.
somebody is business, and the desire is to be profitable, right? But what was happening on the outside, I had a beautiful space. It looked like I was thriving. It looked like I was healthy. It looked like I was happy. And underneath the surface, I was paddling like hell, and I was really, really unhappy. And so finally, what I realized is I'm depleted.
Mhm.
Like
mm,
my life force energy, my personal vivifying signature that identifies me prior to even walking into a room is flatlining. Flatlining. And so consequently, my body followed suit. Like
Yeah.
there were tons of messages, tons of signals that said, time out, Mary, time out, slow down. And I did not listen. And so it knocked on my, you know how the universe works, you guys. If you don't
Yeah.
get the message the first time around, it's going to come back a second time around. And then the third time around is not so gentle in the
yeah,
communication.
God, you know, Dr. Mary, you're saying things, and it resonates so deeply, you know, because I think it, any practitioner that's been going for a while goes through this, right? And they go back and they have to kind of return to source to kind of replenish themselves, or they're done. You know, I mean, you've said so much now that like it is mirrors my clinic, where you know my clinic has a life now, and it has a message, and people feel it when they come in, and the staff gets it, right? But on the same token, they look at me and they're like, you okay? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, you know, like, what do you need? Do you need a nap? Yeah, yeah, I
yeah,
do. Yeah,
yeah,
you
they do.
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. So Tom, I'm going to talk to this. I'm
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
be
You're
honest.
in Ho Chi
Yeah,
Minh.
please.
What are we doing in Vietnam?
Okay.
Yeah.
I forgot
Yeah,
we're in Vietnam. So I
yeah.
went through
We're in
a
Vietnam.
huge identity crisis, right? I woke up on the other side of the world and I was like, hey, wow, oh, who am I? What am I doing here? And once again, what is my purpose? And oh, by the way, what the hell just happened in the last 20 years?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
What was all that business? So I did what any sane person would do. I ran away from Ho Chi Minh City and I went to Bali, Indonesia, finished up my YTT, my yoga teacher
Yeah.
certification. And then something really magical happened while I was there. I started to meditate seriously. And then I was like, I came back to Ho Chi Minh City, continued my meditation practice. And I was like, what is going on? What is going on? And so I literally knew that I knew the anatomy, the physical body incredibly well from the neck on down. I knew the central nervous system, right? I knew it like the back of my hand. I knew how the body responded. But I was like, wow, what's happening in between the ears? When I meditate,
Yeah.
what's the neuroscience behind all of this? So then I was like, okay, now this is cool. I don't know what's going on, but who can teach me as to, what's happening? Who can educate me? So I started to research this and I stumbled across positive psychology and Dr. Tal Ben Shahar. So then I went and finished up my certificate in positive psychology. I'm living in Ho Chi Minh City, flying to Lenox, Massachusetts in order to
Huh.
do the training. And then, none of this makes sense, right? I can't make this stuff up. There's no linear concept to any of this. So, as fate has it, I knew that the message behind positive psychology is like what makes different people tick. Why is meditation, the neuroscience, so effective and transformative? So then my husband who is in education said, what if we design a nonprofit, a program that teaches teachers how to become more mindful within the classroom with the purpose of being a role model for their students? And then I said, okay, well, let's do it. So then you got to understand, we left Ho Chi Minh City, then we moved to Bogota, Colombia.
Mm.
So I'm in Bogota. I'm downstairs in our little apartment that we lived in, and I'm creating content. And as fast as I'm creating content, it's being translated into Spanish. Never in my wildest imagination did I think that I would be curating content that was going to be used in Latin America, but it took off. It took off in big school groups surrounding outside of Lima, Peru, and then also in Bogota. So I'm like, this is super cool. This is really impactful. I feel like we're making a difference. I'm like, okay, so this is kind of in alignment with my purpose, right? And then I was like, this is not what I need to be doing. So then I was like, what do I want? What does my soul need? And then I realized that I wanted to go learn more about energy. And that's when I enrolled in the Academy of Intuition Medicine in Sausalito, California. Now, mind you, I then left Bogota, Colombia. Now I'm living in Bali, Indonesia. And so I'm doing online training to better understand energy and how I can help support other people remotely. So I was like, okay, wait a minute. Let me wrap my head around this. Wait a minute. So energy is neither bound by time nor space. It's neither created nor destroyed. So that means that I can hold a frequency and entrainment just like I did when I had my physical brick and mortar place as a chiropractor. Now you're telling me I can do this and help support people get to the foundational root, okay, of perhaps some challenges they might be experiencing as far as their own personal energy system. So once again, I'm surrounded by people who say, yeah, let's tap into these extra senses that we have. Let's learn to develop even more my psychometry, my clairsentience, my direct knowing, my telepathic centers. So all of a sudden, combined with my meditation practice and the tools that I was learning at the academy, things just like blossomed exponentially. And Tom, it was at the academy that I learned at the very, very first module, the very first lesson was how do you mutually separate and not take other people's energies on? And those people that are in the healing industry, even in the service industry,
Yeah.
I'll be even broader. They are trained to give of themselves to be of service to another person. But nobody talks about, hey, there should be an energetic boundary. And at the end of the day, you come back to self, you define your boundaries, you make them loud and clear, you severance any energetic cords that you have with these people, places, and things so that you can rejuvenate yourself. You can recharge yourself so that you're not burnt out, you're not fatigued, you're not depleted. And I was like, well, why didn't somebody teach me this in chiropractic school? Why don't they?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that question is pervasive in almost, I think, every health
You know,
system out there.
I think it's funny, and I think it's even bigger than that, because my mentor certainly talked about that, right? That was, you know, and acupuncture gets to be, I would say, even more further out than say even chiropractic, right? You know, the chiropractic schools in the States, at least, what are there? There's like 5 or 6 of them now. And there's one that's like, oh, that's the one that's out there, right? And then the other ones are a little bit more like, no, we're doctors, right? We do this. But the roots of all that medicine, whether it's Ayurvedic, I know we're going to talk about the chakra system soon, whether it's chiropractic, whether it's acupuncture, or whether it's even Western medicine, whether or not they want to admit it, um, that energetic exchange is a real thing, you know. And sometimes we're not even trying, and in our empathy, we overstep.
You know what? You couldn't have said that any better. And it was super clear. And it happened with every interpersonal relationship that we
Mhm.
have throughout. I don't care if it's the person that you see at Whole Foods or wherever you pick up your salad for lunch, or
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
drink
yeah.
coffee where you get your coffee, or with your family members, with your kid, with your parents, with the extended community. It happens.
Well,
It
and not only
absolutely happens.
it does happen, and I guess I'll add something from the non-medical side. Like I think one of the themes that we recursively see on this show is that a lot of these ideas, we're talking about energy right now, and clairsentience. Like, I mean, first of all, that there's like 4 or 5 of them, and I can never remember them. But like, there's like clair
Declares.
audience or something like that. There's like a couple
Yeah.
of them right there, but they're fun words to say. But like, if you think about those things, right? Like, we get those not just health related, right? We were joking about politics before the show hit go, and like, even that, right? Like, we live in a world now where you can't really have a political conversation with most people because that energy transfer happens involuntarily
Hmm.
and immediately, and that energy level is really disruptive on both sides. It's not even about an ideology, it's about a delta between two people's energies. And we have all these words for it. We can, left, right, Republican, blah blah, conservative. Like, we've got all these other words for it, but really what it is in my mind is just, we have a delta of energy, and that energy, instead of just coexisting, is combating. And that is where we can take a lot of lessons out of the things we talk about here that are health related in particular, but we could absolutely apply them more broadly into basically every facet of our life. It doesn't have to be confined here. And I think that's one of the big, I don't want to say awakenings, because that makes me sound like, foo-foo and fringy, but like, I think there is a bit of an awakening going on. People are like thinking about, oh, this is a thing, right? And I'm sure, Dr. Mary, you've seen this, and I hope we get into this a little bit more. But there's more. I don't know that these professions or these thought practices would have been able to flourish 20 years ago. People just didn't have the EQ or the IQ to actually even pursue them, right? So I definitely think there is a bit of an awakening from that standpoint, that like, hey, wait a minute, there's like a lot more going on here than
Yeah.
than is on the surface, right? I can't just take a pill and get happier, right? Like, I gotta, I could take a pill and it might make me happy-ish, but like, there's a bunch of other stuff I got to peel back. But anyway, the non-medical sort of
No,
intertwine here.
I agree, Matt. And there are a few things that, if time permits, that we can expand upon when you talk about that delta exchange energetically
Mhm.
between two people, regardless what the conversation is. I do think that there is an element scientifically that happens. There is an entrainment process. And we can talk about that. I'll touch upon that a little bit. And I totally agree that as a society worldwide, we are primed, ready, and willing to receive that things can be and can look a little bit more differently.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So yeah, so let's just keep that ball bouncing. So okay, so
Let's,
we sort of, what I read from you, and I don't want to overly reduce this, but what I read from you is sort of a layering effect that you had over the sort of the first part of your journey.
yeah.
Right? You learned this, then you learned that, it led you here, it led you there. So as you got to sort of, I don't want to say finish line because that never is a thing, but like as you sort of built and amassed this library of multi-disciplines and intertwine your thoughts, like what got you sort of where you're at now? It looks like you're pretty specifically, you know, the energy stuff, you do have an audience, right? It does appear that you sort of dive in deeper on females over 40. And I'm just curious, like, it's a pretty specific cohort, right? Like what led us there, and what makes your sauce better for that cohort? I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, I think that's a legitimate question, and I'd like to answer this in kind of an indirect way.
Sure.
Go
I
ahead.
want to go. I want to go back to
That's
what
never
Tom
happened on
was
the show.
talking about when he was talking about empathy. Okay, empathy is an emotion that comes from the second chakra, just below the belly button. And we're conditioned, men and women, and this is going to start to allude to the answer to my question, is that women are specifically trained to be the caretakers, to receive energy from other people, hold it as their own, with the intention of making the other person's life a little bit easier. And what's so backwards about this is that it's robbing the other person of their own journey. So as mothers, as business owners, as the primary, as parents age, that's what we do. We take the energy on, we absorb it, thinking that we're being empathetic and that we're doing something good. We absorb that energy as other people's energies into our own physical space and our electromagnetic energy that runs through us and surrounds us. So it's easy for me to have compassion, which comes from a different energy source, a different energy center. It's easy for me to hold space for women because I have that experiential understanding. I have that somatic awareness within my physical body. Now, I will even say that my reach, my desire is even more a specific target market. I'm looking to help support spiritually driven women who have already committed to the healing journey. They've done various different modalities. They know it works. And they're not coming from a place of dysfunction. They're coming from a place as to how do I align even more so with my authentic self and my purpose.
That makes sense. So you're like a phase 2 operator, right? Like you're like, all right, get through the triage part and then come see me once you've kind of put the fire out, right? Like it's time to.
Well, you know what? I want to relate this to martial arts, which is kind of a weird thing, but my mentor certainly did it a lot. Where, like, Tai Chi wasn't something that you jumped into. That wasn't your first Chinese martial art, right? That was finishing school. You already have a system or two behind you. You already have some mastery there, and it's more about controlling your body, and in a very practical sense, the biodynamics generate the force or the energy that you're using in that, right? So now we've got this framework, and now we're coming in to refine and polish.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. Now
That's a
let me
beautiful
ask
analogy.
you, Dr. Mary, what that observation about empathy coming from the second chakra, like how is that different just by way of comparison with the masculine or males in general? I don't want to say just masculine, but
Truthfully not.
it's not. Okay.
It comes from, and the second chakra, you keep mentioning clairsentience. That's the energy center that people run clairsentient information from. And clairsentience is just perceiving the awareness of another person's energy or another place or another thing's energy. And that information comes in through the auric field, in through the biofield, gets picked up by that specific chakra. Okay. And that's where we emanate empathy from.
Interesting. So are I guess the difference though between how men process that same data and women, you said that women are sort of programmed to sort of hold that in a different way, in this caregiver kind of way. And I think you even said rob the other person of that. Like how how is that? I just walk me through that a little bit. Like, how is that
Mhm,
robbing me, for example? I mean,
mhm.
I'm married 20 years with her, 27 years though. Like, but that absolutely describes my wife. It also describes her mother, and from what I understand, her grandmother. Like, they held that sort of way of life very, very tightly, right? And so it was like, okay, I'm going to absorb all of this, and I'm going to do all these things to make your life better, even though it doesn't always. I mean, practically that didn't work out all the time. And actually, we can talk about that a whole nother day. But I'm just curious, like, what is the robbing component of it, and how are males sort of equipped to process that different?
Matt, I love this question. I love this question because you're opening up a whole nother conversation, and that is your woman, your wife is not unlike any other woman, in that she has been ingrained, right? Genetically speaking, she's been programmed from her mother on the maternal side, her mother, her mother's mother, her mother's mother's mother. So there is a genetic predisposition as to what are energetically we've been role modeled and physically how we role model. And so we show up in this world by what is programmed within our DNA and what we've learned in our environment as we've grown up watching our mothers. Okay. So that's the first thing. And that typically has been, and again, this is where I say, I'm generalizing, but
Sure.
women are really good caretakers. And so their intention is to make peace and to hold energy for other people to make their lives easier. Men do the same thing. Men do the same thing. Instead of the energy still comes into the second chakra, and instead of it being transferred in women, it gets transferred into the ovaries, and in men the energy will get transferred into the testes. So all of the hormonal regulation that is governed by these endocrine systems then will become, I'm going to say, imbalanced.
Mm.
Okay. And the endocrine system physiologically in your male body is no different than the endocrine system within my female body. The one thing that is prevalent that I hope the listeners learn to embrace is the endocrine system, which is responsible for regulating the hormonal system. You can't just isolate one endocrine gland. If you start to have some kind of a malfunction or imbalance or underproduction or overproduction, it's going to affect the entire endocrine system.
Yeah.
Everything from the pituitary, pineal, thymus, thyroid, pancreas, all the way down to the testes.
Yeah, in the
So
clinic, I describe it as a symphony, right? And if one instrument or one section is out of tune,
Yeah.
everything sounds off.
that's true.
Sorry,
And
I
it
That's a
is.
great
stepped
analogy.
on you there. I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
no, I love that analogy. And I loved
Yeah.
your analogy with the Tai Chi.
Yeah.
It's so
It,
funny. I'm like laughing about your description of it because, like, I think, Tom, maybe you could also empathize with this, but like, when there's an emotional input,
Mhm.
my wife's reaction is sort of like to go into motion to
Yeah.
sort of pad that in whatever, but it's mostly from a home or a lifestyle thing. When I get that energy, I'm grabbing a tool belt and I'm building shit. Like, I'm out
Yeah.
there. I'm like,
Yeah.
all right,
Well, the expression is
let's
different. And
yeah, let's
and
fix this. I can
Yeah.
fix something,
yeah.
like, and
And Dr. Mary touched on the second chakra here, right? And it's interesting because we can't go one for one Chinese to Ayurvedic systems, but that second chakra is below the belly button. And that we would call the Dantian. This is the special place, right? This is our physical center, right? So this is where, and to say Tai Chi again, this is where the motion should come from. This is where
Mhm.
things emit out of our consciousness, and we tie that to the kidney system and our essence, how long we have on the planet, and kidney and liver, and once again eastern western and skipping around systems, we get into trouble. But that's where we're talking a lot about endocrine function too. So it's nice to see the similarities coming in multiple phases, right? And even if we went back to chiropractic and we looked at the spine, the nerves that innervate that area also innervate kidneys, bowel bladder function, sexual function, these kind of things. So really, we're speaking different languages, but we're the message is similar.
It's absolutely the same, Tom. And I just really want to honor what you just explained in the conversation. And that is, it's so multifaceted. I
Hmm.
mean, when I say that the human body never ceases to amaze me, I'm telling you sincerely, it never ceases to amaze me. It's so beautifully complex,
Oh, yeah.
right? And yet it's just as, it's beautiful. It's
Hmm.
absolutely blows my mind. Blows
So
my mind.
I'm with you 100% on that, but I guess let's use that as a springboard to the next part, which is like, okay, so we can. It seems to me, and I totally am with both of you on this, that like we can sort of look at somebody perhaps in distress, perhaps on a healing journey, and say, okay, let's start, and here's an order of operations. Let's check under the hood here. Let's check under the hood here. Moving past second chakra, like what are sort of like the next on the list, right? Like we get the emotional center handled. Like where do we look next? Like walk me through the rest. Let's just keep going down this road.
Yeah. I have to share with you. I'm kind of buzzing because I want to couple on what Tom was talking about, the Dantian. And honest to goodness, I mean, when I think about the Dantian and I think about the alignment, right? That alignment of intention and that alignment of purpose, it's like I can almost imagine those beautiful gymnasts, the Olympic gymnasts. You see them right before they start their routine, and you see them go to this place of certainty of execution. And they drive from that space. And that comes from their desire, right? Their deepest desires to create something. And that's the second chakra. So, Matt, one of the places that I want to go next is talking about the first chakra, right? The chakra that is located closest to the earth, deep within the pelvic bowl, right? Most intimately connected with the adrenal system. So we were talking about burnout, we were talking about stress, we were talking about all of those things. So if I were to say if there's an underlining theme that I see in my practice is the dysfunction of the first chakra, not being able to truly ground down, meet the frequency, to meet and greet the frequency of the earth. That place, that earth energy, that beautiful Gaia energy that is just so rich and so nutrient dense and so resourceful and so compassionate and so loving, that allows people, when you can ground down from the space of the first chakra, and I know, Tom, you're going to talk about this, and it coming through the meridians of the feet system, traveling up the meridians, up the legs, into the torso, that allows people to really, really deepen and lean into their awareness of trust. Trust that I am enough in this present time. Trust that I will always be cared for. So there is no financial discrepancies. There are no worries, that you believe in the abundance, that you will always kind of have the safety and the security that you desire. And I think that that's also the core root. Tom, you're going to love this. Comes from the core root of fear.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you're describing knowledge that I think came out of all of Asia, what, 10,000 years ago.
Yeah.
It's
And
like
now I'm
this
buzzing
is this
though.
is
Yeah.
so ingrained in just the essence of humanity, right? You're seeing how we function, not just from a physiological, hey, here's how I move my body, here's how these things work, but a psychological and emotional and a spiritual component as well, which is one of the things that has kept me in this field this long.
And I will tell you, we have a guest coming on the show. We have to schedule her still, so I don't have a time, but she wants to talk about yoga nidra. And,
Hmm.
part of her process is to do an interview. We did about a 45-minute interview, and she gave me back 3 yoga nidras. And when I talked to her afterwards, after the interview, she goes, one of the things that you sort of focused on, and I'm not even sure you're aware of this, is you have a very tenuous relationship with safety. She's like, you don't feel safe, not in a physical way, but in a financial way, in a spiritual way. You've always got this sort of like gap, if you will, between safety and your reality. And she said, but here's the funny part, you're like 99% of the people that I talk to. She's like, this is not like, you're not unique here. And I'm not saying that to be condescending, but you're really like, this is a big deal. And even in every coach, every wellness conversation, every meditation conversation, everything, there is this recurring nightmare of safety, right? Like of I am enough. Like nobody is enough. This planet is filled with 8 billion people who are not enough, right? Like, and like I don't want to derail us here too much, but like that got me thinking about, like, out of all the years that humans have been taking oxygen on this planet, like at one point it was really hard to live, right? Like, I mean, shit, you were worried about like making it to 20, and like, were those people thinking about their energy pathways? For sure not, because like they just were, they just wanted to eat and stay and not freeze to death. We have this incredible luxury now where we have the ability to like introspect on all of these things. And like, it's fascinating, but it's also terrifying because hundreds of thousands of years have led us here. And I just think it's weird that none of us, I don't want to say none of us, but like if I'm taking everybody we talk to at face value, it seems to be a really common theme that people are just like really unsettled in this category.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think we're circling around the same concept, right? This is the burnout, right? Adrenal means on top of the kidneys. The kidneys deal with fear. We're still in that chakra system too, where all of this is revolving around our ability to root in not only who we are, but to like, to make it sound more esoteric, the earth itself,
Yeah.
right? The bottom of the kidney channel is the bottom of the foot. And that's our contact point, right? And when that's unsettled, how do we have any footing? How do we have any root? I mean, the like, literally calling it footing is maybe too on the nose, but
Yeah.
And your ability to root down and to really trust, right? If you're using the imagery of trees and the rooting system to really infiltrate into the earth's frequency. And I think, Matt, historically, and Tom, you can speak more to this, but if you look at the the people that live in Southeast Asia historically in their history, they were thinking about connecting with the earth. They were walking around barefoot. Again, their desires for survival were different than what our desires are. And Matt, I agree. It is a luxury that we have evolved, that we are bringing this introspection. Like I said, we're primed. Humanity is primed to take our evolution to the next level, and that is to include
And I
the
think that next
spirituality and all that is, and to connect
great
into the cosmic sphere,
right?
the energy of everything
Extending
that
lives into
surrounds us
120,
and runs
130,
within
140
us.
years, like, right? The counterbalance to that is that our current worldview on life extension is simply having more years to live, No, God, no. That's it. Right. Spot on spot, because you're like, yeah, of course. Like, if you want to do that, you got to do this. Like, there's no.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny.
So,
Matt's talking about life extension, and it comes down to the fundamental fear of death, which is also
Right,
that same
right,
chakra, that same kidney.
right. I was going to go there, Tom.
I'm sorry.
And Matt, I mean, do you want to live to 120 with the same fear-driven default mechanisms that you have within your
Yeah, when a
ingrained within your
CEO gets
neurology at
back
the
to what they
moment?
find
And the
happy, and
unfortunate thing,
again, we can use different words for this. We've used on this manifestation of that, I think. And she said, when they find joy, all this other stuff, financial success, the same thing. So I just think it's awesome that we're coming at this so many different ways, and I love the deeper dive.
I'm going to share a quick story,
I just want to
only
make
because
sure
it just happened 2 days
we just
ago. So I had
can
the
honor what you
opportunity
came
to
here
sit
to
with
say,
a
and just
lovely
kind of finish
woman
that.
who has
So
been holding
we've
space
got,
for women and really
we're in
embracing
chakras. Where
self-love
do we
and
go from?
compassion. She's written 13 books. She's approaching her 80s, and she says, you know what? By golly, I got it. I think I really do love myself. And I'm looking at this woman and I'm like, you're a psychotherapist, you're an author, you have done so many, holding space for others in their healing journey. And at the age of 80, you're just now embracing it. And she says, yes. And I still have a default, a go-to emotion that throws me off track. But now I identify it a little bit quicker and I have more compassion for myself. That's beautiful, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but is that the purpose? Like you got to get to that point, right? It took her how long? 80
But
years.
she stayed true to it. That was her
Yeah.
message. Space for self-love and compassion. Yeah, people can say that, but do they really embody it? I can talk about chakras. Do I really embody the themes in the neurology underneath it? Tom can talk about meridians. Does he really embody that's
And it's funny, we've got a woman coming on the show, I think in 2 weeks, who's dropped out of her career and has gone into coaching CEOs to find joy. And I said, well, what does that mean? She goes, listen, when a CEO gets back to what they find happy, and again, we can use different words for this. We've used on this in this conversation, true purpose and all this, joy is just a different manifestation of that, I think. And she said, when they find joy, all this other stuff, financial success, health, longevity, it all just follows along like you're towing it in a trailer, just like, but you got to have that first part done. And I'm like, it's funny because that's sort of a very Western mainstream way of putting this conversation into that, but it's saying the same thing. So I just think it's awesome that we're coming at this so many different ways. And I love the deeper dive here. So just Dr. Mary, I know we have a little bit of a time clock today. So I just want to make sure we just can honor what you came here to say and just kind of finish that. So we're in chakras. Where do we go from there? Right. Like we're sort of like looking at how this all balances out. Like where do we go from there? Like what happens next?
Matt, we've been talking about it. We just haven't talked about the pathway. Okay. So let's just talk about what happened. My belief system is, sincerely, that we are our physical dense body, this is the human home in which our spirit lives, is surrounded by an electromagnetic frequency called the biofield or the aura field. As we exist in today's world, we are receiving information from a variety of different sources simultaneously. Some of us have a firm container, strong boundary that says, I don't need to receive all of this information. But then there's more people that allow this information to come in through the various layers of the biofield. And then eventually, with time and repetition, it will impact the vortex of the energy system of the chakra system. So that energy comes in, it gets assimilated, it gets processed, it then gets sent. The information gets sent neurologically and chemically to the endocrine gland associated with that chakra system. Then what happens is a whole series of chemicals get produced, right? Gets picked up by the bloodstream, gets picked up by the central nervous system. All the information goes straight up into your brain. The brain then starts to chemically react by creating more neuropeptides. There's a whole neuronal firing that's happening within the physical brain and then gets sent back down through the central nervous system, out the energy centers, into the expression of the world. I mean, it's happened so fast. And I think the main message I want the listener to understand is that with this awareness that we have these pathways, we have various different themes, various different chemical changes that happen within the body, we can choose to change the expression of how we choose to run the energy. We can A, have better boundaries. B, we can neutrally separate. We can connect with the Earth's frequency and release any and all discordant energy which no longer serves us in present time, to release it down into Mother Earth, because that's her job. That's her job. She takes that energy, she recycles it in her own magical way, and then she provides life force energy or earth energy to another sentient being. It's a give and exchange, and we are part of a much bigger system.
That's a lot to unpack, and I love all of it. But like as you're saying that, it's amazing how vivid that image in my head is, right? Like the movie that I played just now as you were going through that. It was very easy to understand, and I think that there's two reasons for that. One is I think we all intrinsically know this. We might not have the vocabulary for it, and we certainly might not have the training to recognize what it is, but I think everybody understands that. But two, we're back to whatever, like my own deficit, if it's the same as everybody else's. I almost, when I hear that, I want to be like, how do I build an energy Faraday cage to like lock out all the bad shit I don't want in here? Yeah, because like if I could stop that from coming in, then all the rest of that stuff stops happening as well. And it's like, and I know it's not as simple as that, so I'm kind of happy.
Oh, we kind of met, and it's funny because we kind of spoke about that at the beginning, where like that empathy and taking in other people's energy.
Correct.
You know, we touched on it a little bit.
Yeah. And Matt and Tom, at the risk of putting a self plug, because it is
Go ahead.
It is. It's so imperative that we learn how to ground, that we learn how to neutrally separate, that we learn how to regulate ourselves into being in present time. Because those are the foundations that I train all of my patients. I educate them on A, the importance, on B, and how to do it. So what I did is I simply did an audio recording and I uploaded it onto my website. It's absolutely free of charge. So somebody can listen to a 15-minute meditation time and time and time and time again, to where the neurology starts to shift, right? The energy system starts to respond, and the boundaries get to be stronger, and they become more full of themselves, and they carry less of other people's energy. So that's an invitation, for anybody.
That's awesome.
Oh, that's great. Hey,
And
can I
I
share
also
another story from Masunaga Sensei, one of the famous shiatsu practitioners, right? He would describe the whole self as a circle, right? And it's rolling around, and it's a perfect circle, but we have a trauma, right? And it dents that circle. And unless we do the work to push that circle back out, what happens is it continues to roll and it picks up other stuff. So, when we're working healing, whether it's energetically or physically, it's remove that piece and then work on pushing that back out to get that corrected. So it's not just removal of the symptom or removal of the outside irritant, or, not just, take the antibiotic, kill the disease, but yeah, do that. I'm not saying don't, but how do we repair ourselves within that and be whole within ourselves?
Oh, goodness, Tom, you had to bring this up.
I'm sorry.
I love that analogy. I love the idea that, you're a ball and that you've been hammered or dented, and that you no longer are that smooth, spherical type thing. I love that. And any adverse reaction, any adverse experience or trauma that one may sustain, that is stored. And quite honestly, most of the foundational stuff associated with the root chakra, those are traumas that happen literally within this first 6 to 18 months of our lives, if not in utero. And that's what sets the central nervous system's regulation for this lifetime around. So, Tom, if we really want to remove those dents, we've got to go deep into the cellular tissues, right? Into the organs to where this stuff is stored, and then help facilitate the healing from within.
So I need to hit pause for 3 seconds because I've got a question that has a lot to do with this, but nothing at all. So I've never heard that before, Dr. Mary. And the of the is it? Yeah. I don't know. Sorry. Something glitched on my side. My bad. I should know better. I know this tool. When I was in utero, my mother and biological father were not in a good space. He was an alcoholic. He was violent. He was unsettled. By the time I was 6 months old, my mother had left the relationship and started with which has been my father my whole life. But it didn't start off really great, right? Like their relationship started off fine, but like her entry point into this was coming from a place of absolute chaos, right? Like there was nothing. And I've never heard anybody say that the trauma starts out that early, but like my brain just exploded hearing that because I'm like, oh shit, like that actually could explain a couple of my rooted issues with respect to safety and security. And like when you say go back that far, that's fascinating because yes, I have a very specific story, but how many other people have a very specific story that they're not even looking that far back?
Yeah.
Until literally right this second, it never even occurred to me to go that far back.
And what makes it even crazier, we're not just talking in this energetic framework. We're talking about epigenetics. We're talking about your actual DNA code, right? Generational trauma is on your helix.
Sure.
Very, very, very real. And you have now programmed your DNA so where your offsprings moving into the future will also have a down-regulated gene expression of being able to auto-regulate their central nervous system. So it's not all doom and gloom because you have the ability to heal yourself. I mean, environment outweighs the genetic predisposition by a ratio of 5-1. But it gets to come down to how does Matt want to get to the core root of his issues, or does Matt just want kind of like a Band-Aid so that he can age a little bit more gracefully?
Sure. Yeah, no, I get it. It's funny that I don't think we've ever, and I think this is where working with somebody like you might be very helpful because like it took us 40 something minutes to figure out that, like for me to come to that conclusion that only would have happened through a natural course of discovery and observation.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and I know we're not working in a therapeutic setting right now, but if you can get to that space in a conversational setting, like imagine, having somebody Sherpa you through this,
Well, Matt, I mean, since you were so generous in sharing your story, I mean, imagine I couldn't hear. I couldn't literally was born hearing impaired, could not. I knew that there was communication happening from my sisters and my mother and my father. I knew that, right? But I couldn't hear them. And so can you imagine the startle reflex or the fear that comes from not being able to hear? I don't consciously know that I can't hear because I don't know anything different. But the neurology of my body is programmed such that there's a very strong fear response. And it's stored. It's stored within my vagus nerve. It's stored within the tissues of my body.
Yeah. You got
It's
that
unfortunate, but it's true.
Yeah. And that's just, I think that a lot of people it's very easy to sort of pass a lot of this stuff off as woo and fringe because people don't really understand the connectivity that this stuff has with other things. And just using these stories as case in point, it's like, no, there's this data point in my biological hard drive that needs to be, handled, right? Like, I mean, and we could dismiss it and we can not pay attention to it, but that's sort of at your own, I don't want to say peril, but it's like, you could be so much more optimized if you just sort of like looked at it, because we all have something, right? Like it's all gonna, I mean, who doesn't have something, right? I mean, that's, if you're taking oxygen, you've got trauma. Like that's it. Like there's,
That's true.
Interesting. Yeah, no, well, thank you for that. And the other thing, just to backtrack half a second, like the grounding part, it's funny. I've been grounding for years. I usually do it only in the winter or summertime because I'm a little bit of a wuss. I don't want to walk outside and freeze.
Matt, I'm on a grounding pad right now. What are you talking about? Like, why? Look, man, it's like $25 on Amazon for a 2-pack. Come on.
But yeah, like I've always looked at grounding as an uptake mechanism, and you said something I've never heard before, which is an output mechanism of like the downloading that information out of you, and that's an interesting takeaway for me.
Hey, you're getting rid of free electrons.
Yeah, I've just always looked at it the other way. Like if I walk on Earth, I can uptake that Gaia energy, and I looked at it the other way, like, ooh,
yeah.
What if I meditated this out of me and like released it? That's an interesting thing.
Well, it's a funny concept, and I think it gets overlooked even in Chinese medicine, right? We learn the channels go in one direction, but it's energy, man. It's not a highway where everyone's going this way. It's more of this, like, there's currents within that, and you can guide that intentionally. You can guide that physically, manually, whatever you want to call it, and that's the kind of cool thing about it.
Sure. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Dr. Mary, I know we're kind of running up on time here. What do we want to, what have we not said? Let's ask that question.
No, I think quite honestly, I think we've had a really insightful, deep,
I love it. Yeah.
and kind of an inquisitive conversation. I personally, I resonate. With all the things that you've said and the messages that you're delivering. And I'm sitting in a state of gratitude right now for the opportunity, to be here.
Yeah, I would echo all of that as well. And you know what, I got to say to the people who like encouraged us to start this journey together, it's like every single time we get to have one of these conversations, I'm like, I might actually be the luckiest human on earth to be able to have the opportunity to like explore some of these things. And some of them are a little bit more serious like this. I mean, this was great. Some of them are funnier. We talked to a guy who does Scrotox, and
he only mentioned Scrotox in the last minute of the interview, though, too.
We get to have all kinds of great conversations, but when we get to have one like this that I think touches so many different aspects of all of us, regardless of our socioeconomic background, our spiritual background, our station in life, our position in the universe, like it is effective to everybody, right? So
I think, Dr. Mary, let's give you one second to kind of like plug yourself, tell us where we can find you, all that stuff, and then I know you gotta jump.
Well, I'll share with you, Matt, I agree. I am also the host of a podcast called Energy Medicine. And I think I receive more benefit because I get to surround and connect myself with like-minded people such as Tom. And that's how I learned about you guys, was through Tom and the interaction at the podcast Energy Medicine. And we talk about all things that align the mind, body, and spirit. So if listeners, if those topics grab your attention, then I invite you to follow the show. But as far as the meditations, I want to make sure that if you go to my website, which is www.drmarysanders.com/meditations, you can download all 3 of those meditations: grounding, neutral separations, and being in present time, and have those at your own disposal. So sincerely, that's my gift to all the listeners today.
That's
great. That's awesome.
Thank you for that. And I actually can't wait to go check those out myself. They're great. I've really leaned in on meditation over the last like 5 years or so. And we actually have we're interviewing the founder of Muse.
The meditation headband.
The meditation headband.
Lovely.
So we're all like meditation nerds over here. For sure. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Very much so. Very much so.
What Tom? What's your streak right now in meditation?
I'm almost at. Oh God, I just looked at it.
It's
It is 1,964 days in a row. I haven't missed yet.
I mean,
That's phenomenal.
I mean, it's crazy. I've got 40 and I'm like super psyched, but it's because I miss like a day here or a day there, and it resets the clock. I'm like,
oh my God, that would break me.
Yeah. Great. Well, Dr. Mary, thank you so much for having
This was a
great
joy
conversation with us. I really appreciate your time, and
much gratitude to both of you and to all the listeners, and much love to everyone.
Indeed. Great. Okay, guys, thank you very much. Have a good day.
Be subversive, irreverent.
Health is wealth, but you knew that.
Everybody knows that.
But so is following us on social media at Irreverent Health. And check out our website for more exclusive content at irreverenthealth.com.
Oh, I like this.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Irreverent Health.